The Old Testament with the Canaanites surrounding the mountain.
Yeah,
we talk about that.
I'm not going to steal the thunder from Steve. Steve is going to be going into that more specifically in terms of the battle of, with Jael did to Sisera and the Canaanites and in the valley of Jezreel as well.
Scott, maybe you can come up with something brilliant about the fact that at the foot of this hill was the village of Naim, where the widow's son was raised from the dead.
Yeah. I think that is going to hatch in the homily.
Well, except why we're not preaching here.
And the ball.
I just wonder. This was a promise of the resurrection.
Right.
That was a promise of the resurrection. It never occurred to me. I mean, that's a good example of how the geography works.
One thing I'm gonna wait until the homily, because I think you're gonna.
Oh.
That's gonna.
It might germinate.
I'm not gonna steal your thunder. But as I mentioned, this is the account of the Transfiguration in Matthew 16 immediately follows Peter's confession and Jesus' announcement of his own betrayal, his own suffering and death. In Luke 9, around verse 26, you have Luke's version of this, and it's significant because at the end of the Transfiguration narrative in Luke 9, for most Christians, all four Gospels are just like a fourfold composite picture of Jesus, and that's wonderful. But the deeper you go, the more distinctive each of the four evangelists gets. And you can just see how there's no contradiction, but there's a deep complementarity the more you learn to hear Matthew's account and Mark and Luke. Luke has something that begins in Luke 9, right around the Transfiguration narrative, and goes all the way to Luke 19. It's described as the so-called travel narrative. And it has more material that is only found in Luke than anywhere else. For example, the parable of the prodigal son. It's in Luke and nowhere else. The parable of the Good Samaritan. It's in Luke and nowhere else. And it's in the travel narrative of Luke 9 to 19. And this travel narrative describes Jesus' transfiguration and how he sets his face like flint to go to Jerusalem because there's no other place for a prophet to die save Jerusalem. And so geographically, up here in Galilee, you can just see why the Galileans figure so largely in the travel narrative. The parable of the Good Samaritan, because where is Jesus going to be going? He's going to have to pass either through or by Samaria. The 10 lepers, remember, they're all healed, but only one comes back to thank Jesus. And what was he? A Samaritan. It's only in Luke. And so Luke has all of these events unfolding right after the Transfiguration, as Jesus begins to make his way from the north all the way to the south to fulfill exactly what he had announced following Peter's confession here. And so, I mean, it's great to be here as tourists, but we're here as pilgrims, and so what we really want to do is contemplate the gospel as much as God enables us to internalize all of this, because it's not just interesting biography or theology, it's also something that applies to our own travel narrative, our own life story, our own journey, because between here and heaven, we have a cross, we have an hour of death, we have a final exam, and everything we do is preparation for that. And it's not in spite of God's love, but it's going to be an expression of that love, because like Jesus taught the world, at death we don't lose our lives. At death we offer our lives and fulfill the Eucharist that we've been celebrating all these many years, to empower us to make death not the loss, but the gift of life. Steve's here now, so I want to hand it over to him.
You just got the last of the people up.